Action Report. Welcome everybody, and I'm glad that we're here. I think the last time I was here I was dancing, so hopefully I'll dance after this meeting. To see what action the board wishes to take regarding approval of the minutes from the meeting held on September 10th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
Recommend the minutes from September 10th.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you, it's unanimous. Okay, we have citizen comments and we have some citizens here, so please tell us your name and what town you're from, and go ahead and tell us what you think.
Sure. My name is Dennis Oyen from Greenwood, Maine. I'm here to ask you to vote for the resolution for the school funding, compromise funding formula. There was a great presentation given last week on the entire compromise funding formula. One thing that stood out that I don't think a lot of people realize is NURI currently pays $3,134,000, almost $35,000. After year 9, NURI will still pay $2,729,847, or over $85,000 per student. That's what they're still going to pay, and from there after. So when you look at the numbers and what the tax shift will be, I personally feel that it's a no-brainer and that the board should vote this yes vote. And then let's move on with the education part of this, because that's what it's really all about, is educating our students. And a grandfather of 2 little girls now in Crescent Park, it's very important to myself and Betsy that they get the very best education they possibly can in the district. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'm Jim Largis. I am a resident of Newry. First, welcome. Thank you all for coming, and welcome to the Newry Grange Hall. We're going to talk about parking. I know you folks are from away, but parallel down the road. So next time you come, we can probably shut it down. So I too am here to ask you to support the refunding formula that is going to be presented to you tonight, and I'm sure you guys have heard me say this 100 times. But the one thing that I want to point out is we're not voting on the same question. There's an angst that says this is the 3rd time we're bringing this up, what are we doing, let's go. This is not the same question. The question is significantly different. And as it was pointed out last week in that presentation, it's a political compromise. Political compromise is something we haven't seen much of. We have an opportunity to do it. So the compromise is Newry citizens will need to vote to stop the current withdrawal process before this goes into effect. That's a big deal. That's a big change. For that reason, I would hope that you would, as a board, support the refunding formula tonight. And when you go to the voting booth, you vote for yourself. And I would ask you to support the refunding formula. So, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bobby, did you want to talk? Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Any other?
Can I ask for a possible change in the agenda?
No, I think we really, I think that really is something that the board has to do.
Okay. That's fine. All right.
Can we hear what he has to say though as the board?
All I was going to ask is that the resolution is item number 7. I'm just wondering if we can move that up to the top of that page, not to the beginning of the meeting, but just up to the top of that page.
Well, what I'll do is I'll entertain a motion from the board.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Board member comments.
I actually would like to welcome everyone to our lovely Grange Hall, and thank Kelly for this wonderful spread she put on. And the next, if we go to different town halls or ranges in the different towns, you can see who outdoes each other on them. Just a little friendly competition. So does everybody like gloves? Yes.
Any other board member comments? Okay, Chairman's report. So I wanted to talk briefly tonight about goals. Yesterday, my wife Emily and I finished a major challenge for us. We hiked the last peak of the 48 4,000 footers in New Hampshire. For many years, we enjoyed hiking in the Whites, and we hiked some of the few peaks. And then about 3 years ago, we decided to set a goal, a specific goal, and that was to hike all of them. It was a huge goal, and frankly, I didn't think we were going to be able to finish it. We kept at it, and yesterday, on a very beautiful day, we hiked to the top of Mount Carrigan near the Pemigewasset Wilderness. So we would not have had the many wonderful adventures, including an overnight hike with my friend Bob to Owl's Head, one of the more remote peaks of the 48. We would not have had the sense of accomplishment if we hadn't set these goals, and we would not have pushed our comfort level and capabilities if we had not set these goals. So why am I talking to you about this? Well, I want to brag a little bit, but for many years the board has discussed setting board goals, and for many reasons we haven't done it. I think it was fundamentally very daunting to us, and that proverbial first step was very challenging. It turns out, and I was hunting for it in our policies, and sometimes you do have to hunt or ask Dr. Murphy, we have policies arranged by category, and B category are board, specific board goals. Well, under policy ADA, it is our responsibility to set annual goals. I'll just read a brief paragraph from that. The board will develop annual goals based on input solicited from a variety of sources. These goals will be shared with the community, the staff, and the students. The administration shall develop appropriate objectives designed to achieve the stated priorities. I think that last sentence basically means that Dr. Murphy will establish his goals once we've established our goals. In past years, Dr. Murphy has done his annual goals. We've reviewed them, but without the benefit of our board goals. So I'd like to propose a first step for our board to develop annual goals. In the next 2 or 3 weeks, I would ask you to get input from a variety of sources and email me and the other directors 2 to 3 goals that you think we should consider to adopt. Before you do that, though, please read under policy in the B category, there is a policy for what our responsibilities are. We have to always be mindful that our board goals have to be in sync with those board responsibilities. I will compile those suggestions from you for our board meeting in November. We'll review them and decide on which to adopt as annual board goals. This may not be the best way to fulfill our responsibility to establish these annual goals, but it's a first step. In coming years, I hope that we can refine the process and that we institutionalize establishing these annual goals as one of our primary responsibilities. So thank you. Okay, committee meetings. SAB 40, let's see, the next one is November 19th. We have an agenda item for that. Education Committee is meeting Wednesday, November 7th, 3:15. Facilities Policy and Personnel Committee.
That's a proposed date.
Okay.
Just want to make sure that
Gotcha.
everybody.
Proposed date, November 14th, 5:30. Finance and Negotiations, Wednesday, well, actually, should we check to see if that's okay for everybody?
Yeah.
Is that Facilities Policy and Personnel, November 14th at 5:30. Is that okay for everybody on that committee?
One moment, please. Just check the calendar.
At 14th? Yeah. Okay, right, so that is now confirmed. Finance Committee on November 7th at 5:15.
Would you verify education as well? November 7th.
Yeah, November 7th, Education at 3:15. So
3:15.
So there's a back-to-back meeting for Education and then Finance. New withdrawal, no meeting. Yay. Region 9 Cooperative Board, November 7th at Region 9.
What is the NSD conference?
It's a secret. It's a secret. Nobody's
Always
Stevens
say
Bank.
that. Always say that.
Walk in the front door and turn left and just keep going to the end of the hallway. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, committee reports, we may not have many because I don't think we've met.
Nothing we were not able to meet. Nothing
So I'll bypass all those. Region 9 report, please.
Roberta Taylor was unable to be here tonight. She's a little under the weather, but she asked me if I would just provide this information for you. Currently, we have 29 students attending Region 9, and the breakdown is as follows. We have 3 students in auto mechanics, 2 in building construction, 2 in CNA, 4 in computer technology, 10 in culinary arts, 4 in early childhood, 2 in employability skills, 1 fire science, and 1 metal trades, for a total of 29 students. And we also are in the process of reviewing the cooperative agreement, and I'm hopeful that I'll be able to bring that to you for your consideration either in November or December.
Okay, superintendent's report, please.
Yeah. Since our last meeting, we've had some appointments effective for this school year. Telstar Middle School, Natasha Howard, JV girls basketball coach. Telstar High School, Kevin Hawthorne, Alpine ski coach. Ryan Kimball, JV boys basketball coach. And Elke Bloss, freshman class advisor. Also have hired Paula Jones, Ed Tech 1, Special Services. She's a monitor for one of our drivers for Special Services. And later on tonight, we will have a couple of agenda items for curriculum leaders and facilitators, as well as a nomination for our open special ed position. We have a video, we think, tonight. It's a very short Telstar Freshman Academy video. It was funded as a result of a grant we received through the Lerner Foundation. And I want to thank Peter for coming up and doing this. We had to, I want to thank Erin too for getting us a hotspot so that we could actually make this work. I say as I knock on wood, we will see. So we're going to do it right on the wall, I guess, right, Peter?
Well, a little limited as to how far I can go with the extension cord.
Okay, so point it that way maybe? Oh, okay.
I watched it at home, and I think it's still on the computer, so
All right, let's take a shot at it and see what happens.
if not,
Someone turn the lights on. Okay, Peter, can you turn around and do it against that wall right there? Behind you? Might be easier. Look at that.
Yeah, they go right out.
Hey,
Start.
The challenge that we have is it's a YouTube clip, so we couldn't access it without internet access. And there's no internet access here, so we're trying to do it through a hotspot on a telephone. Maybe.
Maybe.
should be mirroring it. Why is that mirroring?
The source.
Source. Okay, thank you.
He gets the job.
Bonuses in there. Not doing too well here.
Well, if you want to hit those lights, I can continue with my report while Peter's trying to do that. If that doesn't work, we can watch clips from last night's Red Sox game. That'd be good. Dennis had referred to the October 3rd presentation, public hearing that we had on the cost sharing, proposed cost sharing formula. And I just want to echo what a lot of people have said. Bill Stockmeyer, our attorney, did a fantastic job of presenting the information in a way that I think was very user-friendly. We have posted his PowerPoint on our Facebook page and on our website. Did receive a suggestion that we change the title of it, so I think we just had public hearing or something like that. So it now does say PowerPoint presentation on the proposed changes to the cost sharing formula on our Facebook page, and will be updated on the website tomorrow. So, I think it'd be great if people have the opportunity to go in and check that out. If there are board members here tonight that were not able to make the public hearing, I do have hard copies of the PowerPoint presentation, and you can see me after the meeting. I'll be happy to give you a copy. But I think Jim had mentioned the fact, and Dennis too, I think probably both did, that this is a political compromise. And I think Bill did a really good job of explaining that and talking about the advantages of looking at it that way. And I'm sure we'll be talking about it more when we get to that item on the agenda, but I just wanted to go on record as saying that I was very pleased with Bill's presentation. We had about 45, 50 people roughly there that night, and would have been nice to have a lot more folks, but I think Sam, see it tonight, did a nice job on the article that ran in the paper. I thought summarized it very well, so I want to thank Sam for that as well. Also, at this point, we have 5 people who registered to attend the MSMA workshop. Lainey, Marcel, Sarah, and Bonnie will all be attending one day, and Bob McQueenie will be going for Thursday and Friday. If you had indicated that you were interested in attending and you weren't one of the people I named, please see me after the meeting, let me know, shoot me an email or something. Registration did close last Friday. I know Robin sent out a last minute reminder to folks, but those are the people that we currently have registered. One of the things that came up over the last several weeks was a question about Telstar Athletics and about what we've done and what we could do about the possibility of providing some cooperative opportunities between Telstar and Gould Academy and or perhaps other places. So just wanted to provide the board with an update on that to let you know that's a conversation that we have had routinely over the years. Actually goes way back, probably earlier, but the first time I can remember the conversation happening was when we were looking at reestablishing football about 15 years ago. And we talked to Gould at that point about whether there might be a possibility of hooking up with them and seeing if we could increase the number of students. We've had similar conversations as late as this past fall with regard to the possibility of doing something with soccer and field hockey. So I just want to give you a little bit of background about some of the challenges that we have found when we've run into that. One of the biggest problems that we had this year, as some of you know, with regard to, let's say, soccer, and John Elliott's here, he's a soccer coach, so he can also verify this. One of the things that we're required to do is be sure that all of our athletes participate in 5 practices prior to the beginning of the season. One of the issues that we have with doing anything with Gould is that their school year starts later than ours does. And in talking to Mr. Kenny about this earlier, he estimated that it would have been about the field hockey's 7th game by the time Gould students would have met the qualifications necessary to be able to participate with our kids if in that kind of a relationship. The other issue that we do run into is their schedule is not only a late start compared to us, but also once the fall hits, late fall, early winter, they no longer have afternoon classes, they have evening classes, and they do other things during the afternoon. One of the other issues that we looked at when we were having these conversations was we're also barred from being able to participate on any of their teams because of requirements in their league. So we cannot have public school students or Telstar students playing on a Gould sports team because that's not allowed in their conference. We are able to provide students who live in our district who attend Gould to play on our teams if Gould does not offer a team. So for example, if Gould didn't offer soccer and we had somebody who lived in Newry and they wanted to participate in soccer, they could apply to go through the process here. They would have to meet all of our requirements and so on, but it doesn't go both ways. But the biggest challenge really is the 5 days of practice the late start, and the inability to really broaden our opportunities to meet the needs of both schools, because we have to go by the MPA schedule and the MPA requirements for that. Just so you know, we did have another conversation this year with Dirigo, RSU 56. We tried to see if there might be some way that we could work something out for our kids to participate in some of their teams. That's a long way away, and one of the issues that we ran into almost immediately was transportation. And as you know, and I'll talk about again in just a minute, transportation has really become a challenge for us this year, and it's not just us, it's pretty much all across the state. I've been at meetings with other superintendents, and it's interesting, I saw that SAD 52 in Turner actually had bus driver wanted signs in Auburn, and I know Auburn is looking for bus drivers, so that should be an interesting conversation. So I just want you to know that we have been having those conversations to see if there's any way that we can bridge the gap, we can work together, that we can provide opportunities for our kids. One of the things that I have been pretty forceful about in talking with past commissioners, and I do have requests, I am going to be making a request to speak with someone from the commissioner's office this year. We do not, private schools have the ability to provide physical education credit through participation in athletics. Public schools do not have that opportunity. And that's not to say that there still wouldn't be a lot of kids who would want to take typical phys ed classes. But if you had the option of also perhaps allowing a student to be able to meet their phys ed requirement or part of it by participating in a sports team, then that might increase the number of students that we actually have who go out and play sports, because that has been a challenge. Mark, 20%, is that, what was the number of students, high school students that are currently participating in athletics? Is it?
It's around 20%.
About 20%. So, you know, those numbers have gone down over the years, and our population has gone down. So 20% of 400 a few years ago, or 350 a few years ago, obviously is a different number than 20% of 200 kids. So anyway, that's the background on it. I am planning on continuing to have the conversations as we talk about proficiency and as we talk about standards. It seems a little bit funny to me that the state would not embrace the opportunity to allow us to meet some of those standards and some of that proficiency requirement for our kids by participating in athletics when, you know, they're out there practicing 5 days a week, sometimes on Saturdays as well. So that's the background on that. I just wanted to give you that information, let you know that we have been having those conversations, not just this year, but in the past. It does also open up another issue that I just briefly wanted to touch on with you, and that is transportation. You've heard me say a lot in the last couple of months that bus drivers are really hard to find. Last Friday, we ran into a situation where we did not have enough bus drivers to actually cover our runs. And we had to do a double run at Telstar, actually I think at Crescent Park as well.
Today as well.
Okay, today as well. So that meant that a bus had to go out, take all their kids home, and then come back and pick up another group of kids, which means that that second batch of students isn't getting picked up. I think last Friday it was 3:30 or so at Telstar. Obviously that's nothing that anybody is excited about, but we simply don't have the bodies. We've lost a driver recently to a medical issue, and we do have a few folks in the pipeline that we're trying to get ready to go. But I would implore you, if you know anyone, if you can put it out there on your Facebook pages or talk to your friends, we are in desperate needs of drivers just to accommodate our regular runs. Unfortunately, we've also had to cancel after-school activities, field trips, and so on. We try to not impact the high school because of the MPA regulations, which means sometimes the middle school ends up losing more games than anybody would like, or having them rescheduled. The other piece that I'll just mention that ties those things together as well, if we run a varsity program at the high school level and we are not able to meet the requirements of participating with that schedule, then that ends up impacting our ability to offer that program for several years. Mark, do you want to explain that?
If you start a varsity season and you can't finish your season, have to forfeit, you not only are penalized that year, but it's a consequent 3 years that follows. So it's a 3-year penalty. No postseason options for anybody. So if you can't finish your entire season, which is we ran into with the boys soccer team. We didn't have enough players to start the season. We had to make a decision before the schedule started. We ran the same thing with golf. It's a 3-year penalty. You can't have any kind of postseason play. So it's not only that season, it's the 2 seasons that follow. So it's a 3-year penalty. And the NPA has deadlines, so you have to let their schedule, because it affects not only your school, it affects every single school in the conference, and the schedule's already made. So it's a trickle effect. So it's happened to us a lot in the last few years during basketball season. Now we're into the fall. The other schools put a lot of pressure on the ADs, especially on Gale, because we've tried to start, had to stop and change, and so it messes up their schedules. So it doesn't give us a lot of options when we're going and looking for games to make up to fill, especially JV games. Very few schools have JV programs because they're cut up for budget purposes or for numbers like we are in. So there just aren't options to go out and play pickup. So it's really becoming a big problem.
Next year, they're looking at football, for example, going to an 8-on-8 as opposed to the current 11-student requirement, 11-player requirement. But I know a lot of times people will say, well, why aren't you offering a varsity program? That's not fair to the kids. It's not because we don't want to, it's because if we say we will and we can't, as Mark indicated, it's really a 3-year penalty, which prevents us from participating for an extended period of time. So I think the best way we can do this is to really just try to whip things up as far as getting more and more students involved. And I think one of those ways of doing that, potentially, if we can make it work, would be to allow us to offer it and possibly grant our phys ed credit for that as well. So we have the 2 issues that side by side, transportation and our ability to commit to team sports. And so I just wanted to give you that background. And if you have any ideas, please feel free, give me a call. We're happy to look at what we can do. It was very difficult with soccer this year because the decision was made fairly late in the hopes that we could get those kids to participate in those 5 required practices. And I don't believe that ended up happening until after school started, right, Sean?
That's correct.
Yeah, and then, so we had to make that decision, and then as Mark indicated, a lot of teams either already had schedules or they didn't have JV teams because they were either eliminated for budget purposes or numbers. We are not the only school district facing this challenge with student numbers. It's becoming pretty widespread across the state. So, but please, if you do have ideas or suggestions, don't hesitate to give us a call. I'm happy to look at anything. But I think the key here is to try to figure out ways to just increase the participation rate with our kids overall. So I just wanted to give you that background, make sure that you were aware of that. At this point, what I'd like to do is to turn the superintendent's report over to Stephanie LeBlanc. Stephanie is the executive director of the Oxford County Mental Health Services. And we are involved with the Oxford County Resiliency Project, which she has helped to pull together, and we're a partnership between them and Telstar Middle High School. So, Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time tonight. So I just want to get a quick show of hands from the group as I'm talking. How many in the room have heard of adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, or the ACEs study? Okay. So essentially, just a really broad brush, because I know I only have a few minutes, but I think this helps put everything in context. Adverse childhood experiences are events that happen in a child's life and they're determining now, even in utero, that can impact one's development over a lifetime. There was a major longitudinal study done in the 1990s by the CDC and Dr. Vince Folletti, looking at a correlation between adult health outcomes and early childhood experiences, adverse childhood experiences. So just in context, those experiences are captured under 9 events, essentially the 3 types of abuse: physical, sexual, emotional, the 2 types of neglect, which would be physical or emotional neglect, and then 4 categories of what we consider home life or family traumas, such as divorce, substance abuse in the home, mental illness in the home, or an incarcerated relative. So essentially, what they determined is individuals with 3 or more studies had significant increases in chronic and long-term health conditions, such as COPD, heart disease, cancer, and then the more behavioral health or diseases of despair, such as depression, anxiety, suicidality, as well as substance abuse concerns. fast forward 30 years, I'm trying to do this quickly. What we've now learned is that not only are there long-term health outcomes for individuals that have experienced adverse childhood experiences, but there's a great impact on learning behavior. So oftentimes when our schools are seeing kids come through the door right wound up on Mondays or completely anxiety provoked and running around like crazy on Fridays, there's typically some adverse childhood experiences we can look at and childhood trauma we can look at to sort of better understand behavior. The few things I'll say about ACEs, and I'd love to come back at some point and do, if this group, or even if we opened it up for a community education forum on adverse childhood experiences, just to understand the true science behind them. Essentially, children who experience adversity and trauma are living a survival brain. So when we're in survival brain, our epinephrine and serotonin and all those hormones in our bodies that are typically good in fight or flight situations are triggered, and triggered almost all the time, which obviously implicates how we think, how we make decisions, and how we learn. The most recent community health needs assessment identified that 25.3% of high school students in Oxford County have experienced 3 or more ACEs. What we know about that is that ACEs are underreported, and a lot of times kiddos aren't even marking an ACE that really is an ACE with fear of identifying that and acknowledging that. So ACEs are very common, we know as adults, and this study that was done in the 90s was done on middle-aged, college-educated Caucasians. It wasn't an inner-city study, it was done with middle-aged, college-educated Caucasians. And what they found is that over 25% of the population had experienced at least one ACE, with another 25% experiencing 3 or more ACEs, which is where we get into very life-threatening, if you will, and quality of life impacting behaviors. So, long story short, back in late 2017, I was tasked with looking at a population health outcome, and I was a part of the John T. Gorman Fellowship at the time, which is a big philanthropist organization across the state that funds population health change. And I racked my brain for what I could do in this community or in our county that could impact full population-based change. So I started digging into data, and when I came across the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey data for Oxford County, mind you, I was appalled at our statistics I looked at middle school data as a place to start, and our 7th and 8th graders in that 2015 data, 18% had indicated that they'd thought about ending their lives or harming themselves in the past 2 weeks. 29% reported they'd been depressed, hopeless, not engaging in activities they normally would engage in for 2 weeks, a minimum of 2 weeks over the past year. And 49.5% of our youth felt like they didn't matter in their community. So, being a mental health professional, the suicidality, the depression, those are alarming statistics, but honestly, out of those 3 data points, the thing that really struck me was that essentially 50% of our middle school youth didn't feel as though they mattered. It sort of goes back to the conversation we were just having about students being engaged in extracurricular activities and after-school activities, and sort of the barriers we run into as a system when our youth are not feeling connected and engaged. So I took a charge that was going to be my data point that I wanted to really focus on and bring some resiliency, essentially, to our community. Knowing our children are traumatized and many are living in poverty and have substance abuse throughout family systems, as well as parents with mental health conditions, I decided to try to make a change, in this long-haul change across the community, and start looking at youth health resiliency, or youth and resiliency. So essentially we spent all last year, I gathered a group of community stakeholders, there's about 25 of us from cross sectors, from law enforcement to other community mental health and community service organizations to our school districts, and I'm happy to say at this point we have at least 1, if not 2, representatives from every school district in this county around the table, a part of the stakeholders group, looking at youth resiliency and how we can improve long-term outcomes for our youth. We spent the greater part of last year going around the county providing adverse childhood experiences training within any school that was interested in bringing it in. We had a 30-minute, a 1 hour, a 2 hour, whatever schools wanted. We brought in training just to begin the baseline education for educators around adverse childhood experiences and how that rolls out in the behavior they see every day coming in and out of the classroom. Because what I know as a community mental health provider is that probably 60 to 70% of the kiddos that I should be seeing in my mental health clinics will never walk through our doors. They just won't. And part of that is due to the stigma of mental health, part of that is transportation and pay source barrier. Schools are our new community mental health centers. That is just a straight up fact. The schools are the place that all of our children are going regardless of the struggles they're having at home. As they get older, we start seeing chronic absenteeism and truancy as a ripple effect in the schools, but that's just a symptom of the much larger community and adverse childhood community experiences going on, as well as adverse childhood experiences. So to bring some education to the teachers this past year was very eye-opening to me. As I would do our typical hour training around adverse childhood experiences and the impact on behavior, learning, and help teachers understand what they were seeing and understanding that it wasn't how they were teaching or the curriculum. It was really something much greater than what they could contain or really work with within the classroom that we needed to address. And unfortunately, due to constricted budgets and cuts to programs, our sort of behavioral health aspect looks very different across this county. Every school is doing something a little different to address those needs, whether it's a social worker or a guidance counselor or a clinician from an external agency coming in to support the school. But what we know is that those interventions are not cutting the mustard. There's a major need that's not being fulfilled within our schools. So long story short, as we did the training throughout the year, I sort of just started seeing this overwhelming pattern of teachers in school systems, from little tiny schools in West Paris to very big schools like Oxford Hills Comprehensive High School, all struggling with this same issue of how to provide universal support to youth who are coming through the school doors with a plethora of concerns and issues that we really are not trained or capable to deal with within the school day. So phase 1, teacher education support. Phase 2, I took it upon myself with the backing of the Oxford County Resiliency Project to write a grant to the John T. Gorman Foundation, essentially beginning to address this gap that we're seeing within our school systems and bring some behavioral health support into the schools, which is not a position that's teaching guidance classes or seeing students for individual one-on-one triage. I was successful at obtaining that grant. We received a 2-year grant, $100,000 each year. And what we are doing in this first year is we've identified 2 pilot schools. I worked really closely with Mark and his team last year, and when I heard that Telstar High and Middle were coming under one umbrella, I just thought that Telstar would be a great pilot school because we'd be reaching the most amount of students in 6th through 12th grade. And we're also piloting in Rumford Elementary School, which is our largest elementary school in the county and our most in need as well. So we have set out to embed a behavioral health liaison in each of those schools, 20 hours a week. And essentially what we've been doing this first 6 weeks of school is doing school need assessment and readiness assessment, providing education support to the PDTs as well as the school faculty and parents at open houses. And just really getting that behavioral health liaison to become a part of the school community so that they're there to sort of triage whatever may need to be supported throughout a school day, whether it's a student that's really isolating at lunch or someone that's coming off the bus in crisis, to sort of after ripple effects when we have school lockdown procedures or active shooter activities, really beginning to sort of identify where those needs bubble up and where we need the support. A big part of this work is collecting data, I have to say. We're looking at attendance rates, or truancy rates, if you will. We're looking at office referrals. to really look at attendance, office referrals. We'll be looking at end of year grade level and subject matter test scores. And we're also looking at, amazingly, the extracurricular participation and looking at if, as we implement and engage our students and empower our students, we will see an uptick in those areas we want an uptick in, and we'll see a decrease in office referrals and chronic absenteeism. With the goal of being able to paint a bigger picture broadly to not only the county but to the Department of Education on the fact that we need to bring better support to our schools around our behavioral, emotional, and social well-being, and how to support students in feeling safe and feeling confident and feeling competent so that they can succeed in school. I know I only had about 10 minutes, so I apologize for talking really fast. I did bring some data sheets with me that I only brought 10 copies, so I'll ask that you either make more copies or essentially on the first page, and I noticed a typo, so don't bother, the impression spelled wrong. 2015, the first graphics of 2015 McLean Integrated Youth Health Survey data, looking at depression comparative, Oxford County, Maine, and the country, and you'll see Oxford County was ranking poorly, much poorer than the state of Maine, and even worse off than our national average. And then I just have some longitudinal data around suicide thinking, depression, and community connection. We've seen an uptick. We got the scores for 2017, late last school year, and there were improvements, but I've had an aha to this data. And it's a big aha, and I have a lot of data crunching to do. We need to follow students and not just look at 7th and 8th graders since 2011, because that's a very different cohort of kids. So that can really shift data. On several of the data points, it's been pretty flat. We've stayed pretty much the same. But there's the community connection point. We know that those 7th and 8th graders in 2015 were feeling really disconnected. Another really big piece of work we did last year, because I wasn't getting what I wanted out of this data, is with school buy-in and parental buy-in. We implemented a resiliency survey in the fall, and then another one in the spring. And this survey really focused on sort of 10-question, easy-to-do online SurveyMonkey survey that was distributed to all of the middle school students, well, 7th and 8th graders, around, I am hopeful about the future. I have things I'm good at. I help others. I have an adult that believes me. All those things that we're looking at to build competence, control, commitment, connection, all of those things that we want to see our kids building so that they can become productive and successful adults. And so we're on our 3rd round of that resiliency survey. I'm happy to report this year we've rolled it out across the county to not only middle schools. We're doing that survey in any high school or elementary school that's interested in participating too. So the Oxford County Resiliency Project's gained a lot of momentum over the past year. It's become a stakeholders group of mostly educators and school staff that are finding that venue a place they can come and brainstorm and look at policy and procedure and figure out how we can do what we're doing while being trauma-informed and supporting youth resilience. So the second page you'll see is the Telstar Middle School scores in that resiliency survey for the fall and spring of last year. There was a decline in the spring, go figure. Everybody's a little burnt out and ready to go on summer vacation. And then it's de-identified here, but this is how each school, middle school across the county scored. And I will just say for your purposes, Telstar Middle is D, which you should be proud had the highest resiliency score of any school in the county that was participating. Our fall resiliency score was a 77 out of 100. And then on the back page, it's a brief overview of the work we're doing to build youth resilience, the results that we're looking for, and then some of the performance measures we're going to be tracking. No, it's a lot, so I'm going to leave these here for anyone who's interested, and I'm open to questions. This is usually like an hour presentation, so Mr. Murphy said I had 10, 15 minutes. I'm like, oh, that's going to be a little tough.
Stephanie, can you email that to me too, and I can forward it to everyone?
I will do that, yes. And I'll fix the depression on there.
Stephanie, I have a quick question. With your words, empowering students and my God, my glasses. Competence and controlling and intervention. I'm wondering if you're doing with the trauma education, if you're doing any mindfulness as a tool?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're using a really flexible framework within the schools because every school culture is very different. I know at Telstar Middle and High, the behavioral health liaison's been meeting with each grade level leader and figure out what that grade level wants to do for an activity. So I know, I think it was the 7th grade, is it the 7th grade teachers that they're completely focusing on mindfulness as a goal across the grade, but Jenny's been going in and doing, Jenny Smith is the clinician that we've hired to fulfill that behavioral health liaison role. And so she's been sort of going in and doing intermittent and wrap classes and random parts of the day, mindfulness. At Rumford Elementary, they've incorporated yoga and mindfulness into all the gym classes. So that's a big component of this work. And the other huge component that I can't believe I didn't mention is faculty self-care and faculty support. Because that's one thing I identified last year in my trainings when we have sort of question and answer at the end. It was like, teachers were just like overwhelmed with this newfound knowledge and what am I going to do with it? How can I deal with this? So we have implemented in both at Telstar and at Rumford Elementary what we call Coffee Talk. It's an administrative approved but not attended teacher consultation with the behavioral health liaison. So folks, we're holding them before school very early in the morning and after school. It's completely voluntary, but it's a time, what I like to call is sort of teacher clinical supervision. Because it was astounding to me as a clinician, when I was doing direct service, I was required by my licensure for every 20 hours of direct contact to get 1 hour of supervision. And it was just astounding to me that the education system doesn't have anything in place that's a formalized level of support or consultation for teachers, particularly when you start thinking about these big issues like abuse and neglect and sort of the trauma these kids are coming into school with. It's so important to provide some support behind that to teachers. So we've got a big focus on teacher self-care and teacher consultation as well.
I would just add too, Lindsay's here tonight, and I know that we've developed a PLC, a professional learning community, where we have a dozen people, thereabouts, maybe a little bit less than that, who are participating in this as kind of a follow-up to this. And I also just want to say, as a board, you've been very supportive of recognizing these issues. We currently have 2 social workers, a guidance counselor, and another part of a social worker in a facility that has 375 kids total. And we're seeing great benefits from the additional 20 hours. So we'd love to have you come back, Stephanie, too, maybe later in the year and give an update on how things are going.
I'd love to at the end of the year, even too, with some of our performance measures, because there is going to be a real story to tell here with data.
Sounds
I'm
great.
hoping.
Well,
Thank you for your
thank you
time.
very much.
Thank you.
Lindsay, did you want to mention anything about the PLC?
Yes, so I would just say we have teachers on a voluntary basis. There were some that we reached out to and invited, but grade 6 through 12 representation and an advisory council. So the idea is right now we are doing a book study, Fostering Resilient Learners, which is going to build a great foundation, and actually a book that was recommended by Oxford Hills, and Beth Clark has done it with her school, and it's just the beginning of how to have the conversations. And so we're reading that together, and Jenny is facilitating so that we can then channel all the energy that we have, and the questions and the ideas, and really advise so that we have a sustainable program after the grant is gone, so that this work can continue and that it's really thought out so that we're meeting the needs for grades 6 through 12. So.
Great. Well, Stephanie did a great job of covering an hour's worth of information. And
It didn't
you're
go
going to want me to be able to do that now. So. Well, thank you very much. Earlier today, I had the opportunity, and Marcel was there as well, to attend a Heart and Soul debriefing, if you will. It's a group in the community that's been working for 2 years on identifying potential tasks or ideas for the community to consider. And I'm very pleased that our freshmen were all there. The Telstar Freshman Academy participated. The kids added a lot to the discussion. I think there were probably 80, 85 people there in total, and 50 of them were, ninth graders. So it was interesting to get their take on things, and they were very, very good about the level of commitment that they made to the conversation. So I say that as kind of a lead-in to the video. This is a 3-minute video, and it was one, like I mentioned before, that was funded by the Learning Foundation, and I think it speaks well to what's going on with the Telstar Freshman Academy. I would also mention that the University of Maine at Farmington Education Department came out, and they spent some time there and were very impressed, looking at ways that they can coordinate with us to provide some additional support for that program and help get the word out. So.
Leadership, teamwork,
problem solving, thinking through things,
seeking independently, the skill to work well with others,
and work as a functioning group, not just a group that doesn't get anything done, but a group that actually functions and completes a task.
I definitely learned how to accept people for who they really are. It has really pushed me, to be me, to know that I'm more capable than I think I am.
I think TFA is a good thing for kids that are coming into high school because it teaches them, to learn more about themselves as well as their peers and what it will be like throughout life as if once you get a good job or in the workforce.
Because part of our job as teachers isn't just to teach you what's required of the standards, but really we're trying to prepare you for life outside of high school. And therefore we need to find out what's interesting to you. What do you want to be when you grow up? How can we help you get to that next step?
For the first 9 years of their educational life, they've moved in a school, they've moved in classrooms, and now they're in a completely different environment where everybody is grouped a little bit differently and there's a little bit more freedom and there's definitely more expected of them.
It really challenged me, put me out of my comfort zone because I'd always just been in a classroom. I'd never gone out and tested the stream study. I'd never actually done that.
In science, we did a lot of field work, which is kind of unique.
There's a lot of people watching it tonight. So. I do know. Will they get the water?
Maybe it's a 5-minute video. Any way to refresh that video?
Maybe just hit pause and then try it again.
I lost internet.
Go up to Aaron's phone. It should.
Oh, okay, there it is.
Yeah.
It takes away from the traditional classroom and we go outdoors, the academics are embedded into what they're doing.
We still have the reading, we still have the writing, we still have some of the lectures, but then we take what we learn in the classroom and we apply it.
We look at dissolved oxygen, and this is pretty consistent actually with what we found in Larry program. Good, no?
I worked with this group from TFA, from the Telstar Freshman Academy, to redesign an interpretive trail program. We did some classroom time where I would go over to the campus in Bryant Pond and work with the students on the interpretive panels. So they were doing the design, and they learned something out of it. They learned something about their community. They're doing research, and then they're getting to see something happen in their community as part of their work.
Should we transfer that data?
What TFA does is gives them life experiences that they can carry forward with them, experiences outside the classroom that will translate well into life and enjoyment in things in life that are good for them, beneficial for them.
Some of the best experiences I had at the Telstar Freshman Academy were probably the field trips we went on. I really enjoyed Washington, D.C. because I consider myself kind of someone who enjoys adventure.
We learned how just to be a better communicator, in groups, and I learned a lot about myself.
I feel like for next year I'll be more prepared when it comes to doing assignments and other class activities.
It definitely sets the stage for the rest of high school.
I think I've just become an overall better person.
It's an excellent experience for any student.
So there's a lot going on, and I know we have some new board members, and I would encourage you to give me a call, and we'll get you down so you get a chance to see what's going on down there and experience it firsthand. I think you'll be very impressed, and I think the students will be happy to talk to you about what they're doing and how they see it being beneficial. So in closing, I just want to thank you, folks, for allowing us to be here, and I want to thank the first selectman. You're still the first selectman, Jim? No. Oh, okay. Second or third selectman. I want to thank you for not issuing parking tickets this evening, but to let us get out on a warning. And Kelly did inform me that it'll be a 12-course meal tonight, so I think there's probably more to follow. So thank you. Thank you, Erin, for providing a hotspot so we could show that. So great. That concludes my brief report tonight. Thank you.
Any old business? I don't think so. New business? I don't think so. Adjustments to the agenda. If anyone wants to make a motion to change the agenda items so that number 7, Laney?
I'll make a motion to move number 7 to prior to number 3.
Oh, second. Good. Second. Any discussion?
I have a question. So I was at the public hearing with Bill Stockmeyer, and I heard the term political compromise frequently as well. Something that caught my eye was the political compromise that occurred in 2005 that created our current cost sharing formula, and I was just looking for some clarity around.
Could we wait? We have a motion right now to change the agenda order. We could entertain that question afterwards. So any discussion about changing the order of the agenda? Any other discussion? All those in favor of changing that order? Okay, good. Okay, so we leave that. To see what action the board wishes to take regarding consideration of a resolution to support the proposed change in the MSAD 44 cost sharing formula. So moved. Okay, before we start discussion, I just wanted to explain how I'd like to see this happen. This is one of the more important things you're going to be discussing and voting on. And as with any contentious issue or any issue, what you say is as important as how you vote. Because it influences what other board members are going to be thinking about and how they vote. And I really hope that all of you participate in the discussion. This is an important discussion, and I think everybody in the community wants to know why you're voting as much as anything. Because I do think it is a very important vote. I want to alert you that I will call for a roll call vote at the end of this, rather than voting by hand. We'll do a roll call. That is a right that any of you have on any agenda item, is to ask for a roll call vote. And then what we'll do is we will go down through the alphabetically and we'll record your vote. So I think we're going to start with the discussion with some history. Sure.
Yeah, I can go back and address Sarah's question. What actually happened in SAB 44 is there was no change. So what ended up happening across the state in 2005 is there was a change to the funding formula process throughout the state. And it went from being based on whatever the agreed to formula had been in every school district when it first incorporated, to looking at a combination of student enrollment and whatever they had in place prior to that time. In looking carefully at that, the legislature determined that there were 2 school districts at that time that they felt the impact would be substantial. One was SAD 6, which included Fry Island, which had no students with a very high valuation, and the other was SAD 44. So for purposes of that conversation, the legislature chose to not implement the change in those 2 school districts, but they did implement the change everywhere else. And what ended up happening is pupil enrollments from each town began to play into a factor of considering how much each town paid. And that was primarily, I believe, for the required local. And then whatever your additional local was fell back on whatever your previous formula had said. And I think Bill did a pretty good job of explaining that the other night. So there really wasn't a change in our district. Our district kind of stayed as it was. but there was a change across the state that impacted districts other than 6 and 44, and a few other districts to a lesser degree. Some districts had like a phase-in, where they didn't jump into it right away, but they phased in over a period of years. So, at the public hearing, what we talked about was really wanting to be able to provide the information from the standpoint of how it impacted the district, but also how it impacted Newry. And I think that Bill did a nice job of kind of explaining that. And so I think his point about political compromise was primarily the fact that we've gone now to Augusta on a couple of different occasions. So has Newry, and we've gone back and forth. There have been some other things that have kind of interjected itself into the whole conversation. Legislation that was proposed locally and some other things which also, I think, contributed to the whole situation that we were going through. But it was pretty apparent when we all were there this last time through that the Education Committee in particular really wants this to be an issue that is solved locally. They really do want to step in and just make a determination. Having said that, there was legislation that had been proposed that did indicate that at some point in the process, if there was no progress being made, that the commissioner could appoint a mediator and basically an arbitrator to come in and try to help work something out, but then if it wasn't able to happen, they could just make a decision and say, this is what you will do. And I think probably everybody that was involved in that process felt like that was not something that that people wanted to take a chance on. And I think Bill read that, and I think we all did, people from Newry as well as people from SAD 44, that it would be much better to try to figure this out internally with cooperation and conversations that might bring this to fruition in a way that made some progress, but not necessarily to the point where it would impact the district to the point where it might not be able to function. So I think the proposal that you voted on last spring is the third reiteration, if you will, of this formula, but the big difference in it is that in order for it to go into play, the town of Newry, let's say you vote on it November 6th, and it's approved. And as you might remember, the first time it went through, it lost by a lot. I don't think there was an awful lot of information out there. Last time, it was complicated by some challenges with weather and public hearings and so on, and it fell short by, I think it was 19 votes or something like that. And so this time, the difference is that instead of being phased in over 8 years, it's being phased in over 9 years, but probably more importantly, it only kicks in if and when the town of Newry votes to end the withdrawal process. So on November 6th, if this process goes through and if the voters across the district vote to approve it, and it doesn't have to be approved in each town individually, it just has to be approved by an overall majority of the vote, then it would still be incumbent on the town of Newry to end the withdrawal process before it would be initiated. It's probably important to point out, and Bob, you're here, and Jim, I think it passed by about 80% in Newry the last time through. It was a very overwhelming vote to approve that change in the formula. So I know right now the towns of Greenwood, Woodstock, and Newry, the selectmen have all voted to support the resolution that you have before you tonight. And I believe the town of Bethel is voting on it this evening. And it had been requested that the board also consider a similar resolution, since we were asking all the different selectmen to weigh in on that. So that's the purpose of having it in front of you tonight. I think that there's been a lot of history to it. Each time a proposal has been considered, it's been as a result of the cost-sharing committee that you have formed. The first 2 times you did that on your own. As you recall, last year, February, thereabouts, it came back to the board for a 3rd time. The board looked at it and said, we voted on this twice. We really don't think that we want to bring it back a 3rd time, which then kicked in the democratic process, which involved folks in the community going out and getting a petition that they presented to the board. And in doing so, they had to have a certain number of signatures. And by garnering those signatures, it required you to go ahead and established that cost-sharing committee for the third time, and that was the committee that basically came in and said, we're going to expand this to 9 years instead of 8, we're going to add this component about requiring Newry to end the process before it kicks into play. It does not prevent the town of Newry at some point down the road, or any other town, from looking at withdrawing. But I think in reality, personally, there's been so much time, effort, energy, and resources spent on this over the past several years. I suspect, and I'm just hypothesizing here, but I suspect that if there is something that ends up being agreed to, that is probably going to be well received by all parties. So that's the history in a nutshell. Like I said, the actual complete PowerPoint presentation is on our Facebook page and on our website. I have copies of it here for board members that were not able to be there the other night. I'm happy to answer any questions, but basically at this point, I think that the hope is that you'll consider this resolution and try to line up with what the area selectmen have been asked to do as well.
So I will take you in order as you raise your hands. Discussion. Bonnie, please.
I just want to say to the new people on the board and Sarah's question last time that the people of Newry started, and not everybody, there was a few that started, wanted the withdrawal process because they were looking at this 2005 that came down from the state, and they felt they had no voice, no representation. But the state just put this on them. And if you look at the numbers, you know, it's huge because of our valuation of tax base. And that's like where it was all coming from. But this compromise, which I think is wonderful, I think people, like David had said, are just tired of this going back and forth and just want it to be end and pay more attention to the kids and the education.
Step forward, please, folks. Tell us what you think. It's important. We want to hear from you, Elaine, and then Sarah.
I feel that the original agreement was fair and equitable among the communities, and I would be voting for that.
Sarah?
My question is, over those 9 years, which town fares to see the greatest increase in taxes over those 9 years?
Yep. Okay.
Sure, please.
Greenwood, because it's interesting, Greenwood's in kind of an interesting spot because right now their valuation is about the same percentage as their student enrollment. So these numbers are all going to change every year as your budget changes, as the enrollment changes, as valuation changes. But for the purposes of the public hearing, you couldn't project what every year is going to look like. So we use the same figures year after year. What it will show is that over the course of the next 9 years, I think there's about, I don't have it right in front of me, I do have it in front of me, but I don't have my glasses on. There's about a $400,000 shift, roughly, and Bethel and Woodstock will see increases. Greenwood will stay about the same, and Newry will see about a $400,000 decrease spread out over 9 years. So, Laney's correct in that the formula, I think a lot of people feel as though the formula is fair. I think the question comes down to, is there some ground that can be given up, if you will, so that some type of a compromise can be made. In the packet, there is a page, I believe, that actually shows the impact for each of the towns. I think it's on... Yeah, from the hearing. If you bear with me for just a second. Of course, it's on the last page I'm turning to. So Bethel currently is contributing about $2,875,000. By the end of year 9, that's 9 years out, they'd be looking at about $3,146,000. Woodstock is currently contributing about $1,345,000. They'll be looking at about $1,478,000. Newry would look at going from $3,134,000 to about $2,729,000. So what would happen is there'd be a leveling out, if you will, based on that $400,000. Greenwood goes from $1,050,000 to $1,049,000 plus. So there's very little change there. What's interesting is as we looked at the history of the district, we saw that in the first 20 years of the district, 25 years of the district, Andover carried the weight of the biggest contributor because they had the satellite station at that time. And it was right about the same time that the satellite station faded and went out of business that Sunday River kicked in. And so you could almost, in looking at the history, you could see where that balance shifted from Andover being the highest paying town to becoming eventually the lowest, one of the lowest, if not, I guess it was the lowest. And Newry, at that point, their valuation started to decline, and they picked up a bigger and bigger percentage. Historically, the last 10 years or so, Bethel and Newry have been back and forth about 34-33% of the total budget. And so this would shift it a little bit, but certainly not to the degree that it would if Newry withdrew and the district had to figure out how they're going to pick up $2 million to $2.5 million in reductions.
Danny?
As a taxpayer, I guess I would say that I would never be in favor of an increase, but at the same time, I think this proposal, when calculated, that's about a 1% increase each year over the 9 years. So I think 1% over 9 years, 9% over 9 years is far better than 30% if Newry were to withdraw. As a board member, I would ask if we have a plan, or if Newry did withdraw, and I don't believe we really do. So if we don't, I would question how we could not support this amendment without a plan to function if Newry were to withdraw $3 million. That would be my biggest concern as a board member.
Sure. And just to address that, if Newry did withdraw, it would usually be at least a year out. And obviously I would be lying to you if I told you that I didn't have some ideas about what would happen if we lost $2.5 million. But I think the reductions obviously would be very serious and probably cause quite a bit of chaos to that. I think your point about the 1% increase per year is an important one as opposed to swallowing everything, all at once, if you will, 30 to 35%. The other piece of that too is that if Newry did withdraw, the conversations that have taken place so far would basically allow them, and certainly if we had a mediator involved, probably it would be part of it, would allow them tuition their kids back in at a much, much lower per student cost. And so they'd be then in a position where they'd be tuitioning kids into a school system that had been pretty depleted because of the reductions that would have had to be made. And I think everybody kind of understands that as well. So, yeah, about 1% per year over a course of 9 years would be about right.
Anybody else? Discussion? Carolyn and then Phil.
I support this cost sharing formula. I think it is a great compromise. There is a push in Newry to withdraw, and I think a lot of it is based on a lot of Newry residents feel like that we're treated differently, and I think that's a push for the withdrawal. It's gone on as long as it has. I'm scared that there is still a push for it. I think this is a great compromise. I think it's gonna make a lot of people. I think they would vote to stop the withdrawal process if they felt like if we felt like we were being treated more fairly as is the rest of the state. I'm scared that if this doesn't pass, the withdrawal is still going to keep going in Newry. And we are going to put more tax dollars, more Newry tax dollars, more of every other town's tax dollars that are going into the school district because the school has to counter what Newry's doing. The first year they started this, it was $50,000 from Newry, and I can imagine the school district spent about the same. It's $100,000 that could have went towards some sort of infrastructure betterment at the school or a teacher or something. And I'm just afraid this is going to continue for another 3 years, and that money is going to go. to nothing. And that's my biggest fear. And my biggest fear is if a withdrawal agreement ever gets made and this town and Newry votes to withdraw, I'm scared to death for our kids' school. I'm worried about Newry kids, obviously, because I have one of them. But I'm worried about everybody else's kids that are in the school district. And I do not want to take our money out of it and put my child back into a district that just lost all this money. And school districts are hurting regardless. And I support this because I think a lot of other people will look at this in Newry and then come in March, I say March, but that's not in stone, that I think they will vote to finally stop this withdrawal process. And I hope they do. I hope this is between getting an extra voice on the school board, and this maybe feel like they're getting more of a fair shake. And Newry has one of the lowest mill rates, probably of the 4 towns, and Newry's not looking to save tax dollars. We're not trying to lower what we pay in taxes. Newry spends roughly, I think our last town meeting, we spent a little over $40,000 on community third-party requests. I don't believe one of those third parties actually was a nonprofit in the town of Newry. That's $40,000 that's going elsewhere. And Newry is very community-minded when it comes to that. And I would hope that any tax shift back to us would go towards the community, towards community initiatives. And I think that's all I have to say.
I just want to echo, pick up on one thing. It's important that you mentioned this, and it's important for new board members to know this. This whole conversation about the possibility of Newry withdrawing has really resulted, I think, in a lot of good conversations. I mean, we had another decision that the board made to establish a committee to look at the representation on the board. And up until July 1st of this year, we had voting by weighted vote. And some of you know, we were one of the very first school systems in the state as a result of some work that one of our attorneys did to move away from the one person, one vote process. We really adopted something that was, I think, initiated in the boroughs of New York about a different process that would allow each of you to now have a single vote. And at the same time, the committee actually also decided that adding a third representative from Newry would be important. And there was a lot of conversation in that group. And that group, by the way, was made up of 3 people from each of the 4 towns. And, they looked carefully at this and they said they felt as though adding a third representative from Newry and keeping it with 3 and 3 from Greenwood, Woodstock, and Newry, and 6 from Bethel, mainly because of the big difference in population, was something everybody on that committee felt would be appropriate. And so as of January or February, we added the 15th board member to give Newry 3 representatives like Woodstock and Greenwood had. And at that time, for the first few months, they simply took the 60 votes that 2 people had and split it up between 3 people. But as of July 1st, it all kicked in. So now Newry has 3 out of the 15 votes as opposed to 60 out of 1,000. So there have been some inroads made there too, I think, in an effort to try to help understand and address some of the concerns from the folks in Newry.
Carol?
I just had a question about if the cost share formula did not pass and Newry did withdraw, are we obligated to accept the students back
Yes.
into the district? We do
Yeah,
have.
we are required by law to accept tuition students, correct?
It's a little more complicated than that. Any town that's withdrawing has to have an agreement with the school district to be the primary school district that they would be associated with. The school district does not have an obligation to say yes or no to any town that withdraws, but the town does have to have someone. It would be hard for me to think that that the kids wouldn't be tuitioned back in. like we did with Andover. Andover students who left and now they're tuition back in. But it's part of it would be part of the process. The mediator would, at that point, if it can't be negotiated through some back and forth between the committees, then if the process that the commission was looking at came to fruition, it would be a decision that the mediator would probably end up making.
I'm very, very torn about this. I mean, I understand from both sides, but I feel like Laney that it is fair the way it is right now, but I don't want to see Nuri withdraw. And so I'm just very torn about it, but I do believe I will vote no, and let people make up their own minds of how they're going to vote.
Aaron and then Bob.
Kelly, I just had a quick question. I am brand new on this board, and just what struck me was that Nuri, there's a feeling that Nuri isn't treated fairly, and I'm wondering if there's anything else that is still kind of behind the scenes, if there's still some agitation about not being treated fairly.
I think since the process started, I think that's when, maybe people weren't, and a little background on me, I've worked in the Nuri town office since this process has started, so unfortunately I've seen this thing from the ground up, and I'm sick of it, honestly, but I think there was a small group of people that started to push for this, and I think as the conversation started, that is when, our percentage based on 100% valuation it came out, and I think that grew. People who probably weren't for withdrawal, I think that grew. I think the base grew a little bit. I don't think a lot of people realize that. There was never any sort of public hearing. There wasn't anything, a lot of people didn't know that this school district was getting exempted out of this. And it still sticks in a lot of people's minds right now, and it upsets people. To the point where the town would vote to withdraw, come down to it, I don't know. I think that'd be a deciding factor for a lot of people. Ultimately, I don't know if we came to an agreement, if the town would vote to withdraw or not, but I don't want to take that risk. It absolutely terrifies me. And what terrifies me the most is to have another 3 years of the money that's going to go to consultants and attorneys.
So there's not like a hard fast thing that Nuri is looking for. Is there now? Or do we not?
No, I think it's really at this point the financial issue. The other piece I think that muddied the waters perhaps a little bit is that some additional legislation got added last year for consideration that would have prohibited Nuri from withdrawing. And I think folks that may have not necessarily been concerned or lined up behind the withdrawal felt as though they were then losing out on a right that everybody else had. And and I think that probably ended up contributing to the feeling that people had about not being treated the same way as other places across the state. But a few of us have been around since 2005, and I've been superintendent since 2002. I just want to let you know that when this all came out, this happened like in November when we found out about it, I think. And it was a very quick process. It happened like in a few months where this all ended up being considered and discussed at the legislative level. But it is important for folks to know at that time, I did meet with the town managers, and I believe most of them had selectmen with them. So it wasn't as though there hadn't been a conversation about it, but I don't know that there was any great conversations within each town about it. But that's hindsight, that's 15 years ago. I think at this point, my feeling as your superintendent is that I think if we're looking for a guarantee that, as much of a guarantee as we can expect, that our district is going to be able to move forward in ways that don't require me, our administrative team, our communities, our budget to keep focusing on this issue but allow us to kind of move ahead. I feel as though the time has come for you to consider that. The selectmen in the 4 towns. I've met frequently with the town managers throughout this process. I give them a lot of credit. The Newry town manager is sitting right there with the Greenwood town manager and Woodstock town manager and a variety of different Bethel town managers over the course of the time. But we've had some really good conversations about it, and I think thanks to their efforts, we've seen 3 of the different groups of selectmen vote to support this resolution, and I'm hopeful that tonight Bethel will consider the same thing. So it's just a history for it. Bob?
My thoughts on this are, the whole rest of the state has one funding formula. SAP 44 has a separate funding formula. I see where Newry feel like they get singled out. Currently, they're paying 31% of the school budget, while busing 5% of the students to the school. If this were put in place 9 years from now, based on today's numbers, they'd still be paying 27% while busing 5% of the students. They're still contributing quite a bit. Now, the whole reason for this formula, as I understand it, is because of the relative value of Newry to the other 3 towns in this district. And if Newry withdraws, the whole reason for the formula that we're currently using is gone. Augusta has our eyes on this. We've heard that already. If Newry pulls out of here, the whole reason for this current funding formula is gone. What's to say we're not going to go to the same formula the state has? And will we be able to phase it in, or will it start next year? Quite frankly, I think we're going to end up with this formula one way or the other. We can do it with Newry, still contributing their amount, or we can do it without Newry, and I don't like the looks of looking at this 3 million on this list. I think we're ending up.
Amy, please.
If this motion passes tonight, we've done this a few times, I voted on this a few times already, and I'm confused. If this motion passes tonight, is it done, or it goes back to?
No, your motion tonight, your vote tonight is simply a message to the community. Similar to what the towns are doing, the selectmen are voting just to basically say that as a group, they see the value in looking at this resolution moving forward. So the vote doesn't finalize anything. It all comes down to November 6th referendum, and then only if the town of Newry votes to end the withdrawal process. So it's really you doing what we've asked the selectmen to do.
You're just supporting the resolution. The voters are going to be the ultimate deciders of this cost sharing formula.
So people in the town that read the paper or whatever are going to look at it and say, okay, the board's behind this, or the board's not behind this. And, that's the purpose we're bringing to tonight.
I'd like to hear from some of the folks that haven't spoken, and if David?
Actually, I think I've been in this process longer than anybody. Back in the early 80s, late 80s, early 90s, back when the first withdrawal committee was formed in Newry. I was on that committee with Highbury, Allison Aloisio, and Jim Sisko. And that was the very first committee. After all of that, I was on the fence on which way I would vote if it came to a vote. I didn't think that Sunday River was a big enough company in the area that could support Newry and its school at that time. So I was torn. As a Newry citizen, over the years, I've been for withdrawal, and since I've been on the board, that has changed my mind 100%. I am for this resolution. I think we should go ahead and vote on this and support it for our school and for our kids. And also, another factor is 75 to 80% of the Newry voters did vote in favor of this third attempt.
Anybody else who hasn't spoken? Give anybody a chance, and if you'd like to pass, John, you can pass if you want.
I am also torn on this vote, as Carol mentioned. I'm scared for our district in general. This is a big part of it, but our student population and the population in all of our communities is steadily declining. I'm scared for knowing if I have kids, I'm going to be going to MSAD 44 in 10 or 15 years in general, whether this has anything to do with it or not. That's an honest thought that I've had for a few years now, especially since I've been in high school. When you get older, you start to notice things around you, and numbers in the high school aren't what they used to be, and numbers in all of our schools aren't what they used to be. Another part of this that I have to wonder about too is if this goes through, it's agreed upon that it will only follow through if the Newry voters terminate the withdrawal proceedings. But what if in 5 years after this goes through, Newry decides it's going to fire up the withdrawal process once again? Then where do we go? Because we're locked into a 9-year stint with our taxes, the formula adjustment. Can't change that. Newry's talking about withdrawing again. Where do we go from there? This is going to be a very tough vote for me. I'm the youth of this area. I eventually plan on raising my kids someday, and I'd like to see them go to this district. I'd like to see them go to the same schools I did. I've been in SAD 44 since before I was 5 years old, because my mother works at the district. So, I have, this district means a lot to me. And setting all this aside, I'm still scared of this district. So, I believe today I'm going to vote no.
I think that I'm going to vote for the new formula. Basically because I'm going to have good faith that Newry's going to do, they're going to stop the withdrawal process.
Sure.
I agree with what she said. I mean, I would like to see this ended. And like I say, I hope Newry keeps their, I don't know if it's a promise or what they're saying, but I would like to see this end, so I would probably vote yes.
Okay. Well, I'd like to just throw my 2 cents in. I've been involved in this very deeply. I was the chair of the committee, the withdrawal committee. And I want to explain to you the tactic that we took during that withdrawal process. Compromise was not possible because no matter how you worked out the agreement, at the end of the day, Newry was going to withdraw. So that's why they had a right to start the process, and we had a right to say no. Okay. Likewise, when we had a mediator, the same thing. We could not figure out a compromise. There was no compromise possible. The legislative mandate that almost came into being, the binding mediator, also would not have resulted in a compromise. It would have been someone, a third party, independent, basically declaring what we were going to do, and they would have likely agreed to withdraw. So I want to explain to you what a political compromise is, because that's what I believe this is. This is a decision that neither side is 100% happy with. Neither side is happy with the outcome, because some folks in Newry wanted to withdraw no matter what. We did not want them to withdraw. So this is a true compromise. I want to say that the whole process, the continuing of it, was toxic. It was toxic for everybody. It was divisive for this community. It was divisive for this board. It was not good. I want to move on, and so I will vote yes on this. I want to move on. It's time to find a compromise. I mean, this is what hopefully people do in other institutions of power like the Congress. They compromise. I'm willing to do that. So unless there's additional discussion, any further discussion?
I just have one comment. As your superintendent, I think I said this back in June, I think it's imperative that we look ahead to the future of the school district and that we focus our time, energy, and effort on things that are positive and productive for kids. I'm very concerned that if we take a gamble on this and fall short of recognizing this compromise, that whether it's 2 years or 5 years, we might not be around 5 years from now to worry about whether or not we can look at this again. But I'm confident that given the level of conversations that we've been having, I think they've been very good conversations. And I'm confident that this community as a whole, the school district as a whole, if this gets passed, that's a big if on November 6th, and if we end the withdrawal process, I think everybody can heal and we can move forward and begin to pay attention to how we make our school district the best school district it can be. We have seen some very significant improvements. It's important that we learn how to recognize those, that we learn how to celebrate those, and that we start talking about the positive things. I really believe that moving forward, if this thing can be solidified and finalized, that maybe we can all focus on helping people recognize locally what a positive, productive school system we can have. And as your superintendent, I think that's something that we all need to think about, because I can tell you that for a period of time, a very significant part of my work week has been focused on the Newry withdrawal issue. And there's a lot of things that I'd much rather be doing, and I'm sure that's true with people who have sat on both sides of that table. But I think we're well poised to make some really significant improvements across this district, and it would be nice to have everybody in the same rowboat on that. So I would encourage you to support this.
Okay, I think we're done with discussion. I'd like to, unless there's somebody wants to say one final comment.
I do.
Sarah.
Well, I echo some of my board members on this board in that it is a struggle because I want to do what's best for the kids. And I think you can look at it from both angles. You know, nobody wants to take that risk of potentially Newry withdrawing and losing a huge amount of money that decimates our district. At the same time, what is the plan in place if Newry was to withdraw for the students that currently are in Newry? Is there a written plan in place for those kids, an education plan? I don't know the answer to that.
No, there can't be until that process works itself out, either through a negotiated agreement or through a mediator.
And I think good faith is huge. I think it's huge in our community about what town we live in within this district. At the same time, with something so important, I don't think we can go on good faith. I think to me, there needs to be something legally binding, and that can occur in this current situation. That's what the attorney had stated. That it's not, this vote is not legally binding. This community vote is not legally binding to say that 5 years from now, Newry's not going to decide to withdraw. I'd like to think that in good faith, absolutely, but it's not legally binding and it's not inviting. And so for that reason, part of that reason, I always know.
By the way, just to be clear, there is no legal way to make it binding. And I think that what does make it somewhat binding is the folks in this community who worked so hard on finding a compromise. I think the pressure that would bear on Newry not doing this again would be huge. I think we'd get a lot of people. All I can tell you is that the one battle that, even though we had a stalemate and there was no way that Newry could withdraw within that framework, the legislature, which I do not have faith in, could have gone either way. And I went to the legislature and watched the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee, made up of equal number of Republicans and Democrats, ignore what I thought was important. So this is not a partisan issue, and the likelihood that the legislature was going to, at some point, mess this around is very huge. So it's a question of how much we want to keep this battle going. I think it's time to move on, as David said. I want to spend my time focusing on improving our kids' education. So let's do the roll call vote. Please, Wendy, can you?
Sure. If folks would answer yes or no. David Bartlett,
Yes.
Laney Cross?
No.
Sarah Cato?
No.
Amy Forbes DeVivo?
No.
Carol Everett?
No.
Tamala Goodwin?
Yes.
Bonnie Larges?
Yes.
Robert McQueenie?
Yes.
Erin Mitchell?
Yes.
Cheryl Morgan?
Yes.
Marcel Pollock?
Yes.
Kelly Scott?
Yes.
John Walker?
No.
Danny Whitney?
Yes.
9-5, the motion passes then.
So did you get Wendy 9-5?
9-5.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for participating. I'm really grateful that you all spoke. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Number 3, to see what action the board wishes to take regarding the superintendent's nomination of curriculum leaders and facilitators for the 2018-19 school year.
So, for those of you who are new, we have curriculum leaders. We don't have department heads, we're just not big enough. But we have curriculum leaders who are responsible for heading up conversations around upgrading our curriculum areas. And we have them at the elementary, middle school, and high school level. We filled some earlier this year, and there are a few more that have actually been doing the job now since probably September. But because we haven't had a board meeting since then, I'm bringing them to you tonight. Tanya Arsenault, who had been Tanya Nichols until she was recently married, is heading up K-5 social studies and math. Tanya Prentice, who some of you know, Woodstock teacher, is and has been, and Tanya, by the way, Tanya Arsenault has been in this position in the past. Tanya Prentice, who, as many of you know, was our Presidential Science Award winner from the state of Maine last year, is continuing in her role as K-5 science curriculum leader. And Laurie Davis, who is a middle school teacher, will continue in her role, will be taking over the role of 6th to 8th humanities curriculum leader that Lindsay did prior to moving into the Dean of Students position. And then back when we had the TIF grant, we did have several layers of teacher leaders. Many of the folks who are now your administrators served in these roles. Gina Lavoie, Tanya Prentice, Laurie Davis, and Tamara Davis will be facilitators. And what they do is they help individual teachers develop their student learning objectives for the year, and then provide support, run staff meetings, and provide individual assistance to teachers in various components of educational leadership and so on throughout the year. So I'm recommending that those folks continue in those roles, or in a couple of cases, take those roles over new this year. Very, very positive results for a very small amount of money. I think it's $750 for the elementary, or for each individual, and if they're combined, I think it's a $1,500 stipend. So that's my recommendation.
I'll make a motion that we accept the list of the superintendent's nomination.
And these have all been vetted also by the administrators, so what's that?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Thank you. Passes, motion passes. Number 4, to see what action the board wishes to take regarding approval of the superintendent's nomination of a special education teacher for Telstar High School to a first probationary contract for the 2018-19 school year. Do I have a motion? Second.
Yes, I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased to let you know that we do have a candidate that I'm bringing to you tonight, Crystal Westcott. She had been interviewed by a committee of folks who were charged with looking at the candidates that we had for a special ed position. Those folks included John Elliott, Mark Penny, Robin Frazier, who's a high school special ed teacher, Kathleen Collins, who's our special ed director. They interviewed Crystal and felt she was a solid candidate. It's very difficult. We're very fortunate to receive somebody who's qualified now that the school year has begun. Special ed teachers in particular are extremely hard to come by. Typically, I would have sat down and met met with Crystal, myself, as a follow-up. As some of you know, I had a death in the family last week and I was unable to be around for a couple of days, but I did speak at length with her by phone and went through her resume and asked her a few questions. And I'm pleased to let you know she had to give a 2-week notice, but she is available to join us if the board moves forward approving this recommendation. So Mark and John were part of that process, and I don't know if they have anything that they want to add other than I think she was the overwhelming recommendation of the group. It was a unanimous recommendation.
Any discussion?
And by the way, for those of you who are new, this is a first-year probationary contract, and so every teacher now has to go through 3 years of probationary review before they're recommended for a continuing contract position. After you vote on this, if you would please pass that paperwork back to me so I can dispose of it, that'd be great.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Thank you. Anybody opposed? Thank you. Passes. Thank you. Number 5, to see what action the board wishes to take regarding approving the district's amended cafeteria plan, flexible benefits plan as described in the summary plan. Is there a second? Second by John.
So just discussion on that. Probably about 15 years ago, we went with a third party. By the way, this is not a cafeteria, like Kelly has put on for us tonight. This is a benefit program where we hire a third party contractor. I asked Robin what the cost was. It's a couple of $100s a year. Basically, they keep an eye on IRS regulations and make sure that we are following all the proper procedures and so on as a district. The only changes, this is an annual vote that you're asked to take, the only changes in it this year are the dates, as you saw when you read through the attachment, and the fact that the feds increased the amount that people can put towards their health savings program by $50 a year. Those are the only 2 changes in it. And it's run by Horace Mann. They're an insurance company that oversees it for us. And again, very modest amount of money that we spend to do this, but basically it allows somebody who has their thumb on the pulse of IRS regulations to keep an eye on things for us, so we're doing it ourselves.
Any more discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Thank you. Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you. That is unanimous. Passes. And number 6, to see what action the board wishes to take regarding changing date of the November school board meeting from November 12th to November 19th. The meeting will be held at Woodstock School. Do I have a motion?
So
And the second?
Second.
Okay.
I just mentioned, I sent this out via email once we realized that the 12th was actually Veterans Day. We were so proud of ourselves because we hadn't made a mistake of scheduling anything on Columbus Day, which happened, I think, for 2 years in a row or whatever. But the board has not ever met on holidays, so anyone who responded to my email indicated that the 19th were good. So hopefully we can make that change. We'll get that out into the newspapers and so on, so they're aware of it.